Welcome to Barnyard Language, honest talk about running farms and raising families. We are Katie and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer, with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us.
While this is a podcast for farm families, sometimes our content isn't for the whole family. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Barnyard Language. So, Katie, last week you discussed the fact that you were probably going on a holiday and maybe leaving your husband behind, depending on the crop situation. So, what ended up happening? Was there a holiday with the whole family, maybe?
He was out until, I think, past midnight Thursday night, baling hay so that he could go with us on Friday morning, and we went to St. Louis for 4 days with my friend Jamie and her family. Traveling with children makes it that much more evident how horrific it must be to be, say, a migrant or, fleeing somewhere with children, because if it's that horrific traveling with them when they have video games and easy access to McDonald's and air conditioning,
And it's planned and you have your own vehicle.
Yeah, and you have money and you're doing it on purpose and you knew you were doing it and first world problems. If it's that shitty as a first world thing, I cannot imagine what it must be like under less desirable circumstances.
Significantly, yes, less desirable.
Yes. St. Louis?
So does that mean you did not enjoy the travel part of your, we'll call it a trip, not a holiday?
It wasn't as bad as it could have been. Let's put it that way. Everybody got there and got home and nobody got left at a rest stop intentionally or not. And I'm hoping to find a place to get my car detailed this week because a number of things that I know about got spilled in the back seat, and probably 3 times that many things that I don't know about got spilled in the back seat. So there's that. It's, you know how limousines come with that, like the privacy glass between the front seat and the back seat? I really think that family vehicles should simply have that around every seat. Like there should be a divider front to back, and then kind of like an egg carton, just segment it into, so that no one can speak to anyone else.
Oh, everyone has their own little pod. I like that, yeah.
Yes. And that's the other thing is, I feel like I don't realize how many of the podcasts and such that I listen to are either not appropriate for my family or not things I'm willing to have interrupted by people. So there was that. We went to St. Louis, which was a really cool town. Like, sorry, St. Louis, I wasn't expecting that much, but it's always nice when you go somewhere and you're pleasantly surprised.
See, your standards were so low that St. Louis exceeded them.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm from Iowa. People here are nice. We don't even hold a candle to how nice the people in St. Louis are. If I found out that they were all pod people and there was Valium in the water, I would not be surprised. The folks at the hotel were super nice. The folks at the St. Louis Zoo, which is incredible, especially for a town that relatively small, were super, super nice. The folks at the City Museum, which is possibly in the top 10 coolest things I've ever seen, were super nice. It's a, I think, 725,000 square foot shoe factory that was bought out and has, well, just Google it. Okay, just Google it. But it has things like an entire school bus on the roof with half of the bus hanging out over the edge of this 10-story building, and an airplane that you can climb up to way up in the air, and an aquarium, and indoor caves that go up like 5 floors. And it's just Google it. City Museum of St. Louis.
Sounds very cool.
We went to the Arch, which was also super cool. And it was really cool to start explaining to my kids about things like national parks belong to us. Our country belongs to us. Our country does not belong to politicians. It does not belong to rich people. It belongs to us. And that was, 7-year-olds have a real sense of right and wrong and what belongs to who. So the girl child was real excited that we own this park. Um, I'm not sure she understands that everybody owns that park.
Right, that it's not just hers.
Yeah, she's real excited about it anyway.
She'll share it.
And we all got home, so there were no major calamities.
And I presume that means that the crops got planted and someone looked after animals while you were gone.
Everything that's going to happen got done.
Nice.
Let's put it that way. I think there are, like every year, some things that were hoped for that aren't going to happen, but that's the way it is, I guess. Um, yeah, all the animals seem happy. The dogs were real excited to have us back. So, and my garden exploded in the 4 days that we were gone. I guess it rained a bunch last week and then it got real hot. So there is plants everywhere, which is awesome.
Yeah. Probably a few weeds too, but
Yeah. Even in raised beds, you do get some weeds. So, but a lot fewer and much, much easier to get out since the soil is loose and it's, at waist height instead of crawling around on the ground. So, how are things at your place, Arlene?
well, it was not the week that I expected, but everything in the end seems to be going okay. So I think I mentioned last week my dad had open heart surgery and had been discharged from the hospital. Well, he went back in for a little while for several days. He's still in now. We're recording on Tuesday and hopefully we'll be out maybe today or tomorrow. So he had to make a return visit to the hospital, which was not ideal, but it was good that he went and they were taking good care of him and hopefully getting him back on the mend and back home again and maybe to stay this time. And as it happens, my parents' 50th wedding anniversary was this past weekend while he was in hospital. So on Friday, when I was there and discovered that they were going to be staying over the weekend, I sent a few messages to some close family and friends who are nearby and I thought might have some flexibility in their schedules. And so we talked to the nurse and the social worker on the floor and got permission to have a little party in the visitors lounge on the floor where they were staying. He couldn't go off floor because of his heart monitor, but he was able to come down the hall and he was on a liquid diet for a few days but had been put back on food, so thankfully we were able to have cake. So if you have cake and people, you have a party. So we were able to get some people into a room together to celebrate their anniversary, not the way they wanted, but it was pretty special to be able to have some hugs and have a piece of cake and cheers with some sparkling juice and celebrate the fact that they've been married for 50 years, which is pretty impressive.
It really is.
Yeah, that's a lot of years to be with the same person.
And I'm sure it's nice to break up a stint in the hospital like that because I mean, if you're lucky enough to not be sick enough that you don't care, hospitals are really boring. Which I mean, it's good if your hospital stay is boring, but also it's really boring.
Yes, yeah. Then we had some revolving roommates, and some of them are chattier than others, and some don't always speak the same language as you, so it's hard to talk to people if there's a language barrier sometimes too. So yeah, it's he's had great care, and like I said, I think he's on the mend, and maybe we'll even go home in the next couple of days. So I'm sure that he's very much looking forward to that. He has gotten to the point where he actually doesn't mind the hospital food, though. The first week or so after surgery, his taste buds didn't seem to be working quite right, and everything just tasted terrible. But last night I was there while he was having supper, and he ate the whole thing and said it was delicious. So I didn't even get to share any of it.
Well, good. I'm glad that you had to go find your own food instead of
Yeah,
helping
that's
him
right.
with this.
I had to go downstairs and pay for it. Um, Farm wise, there's lots of hay happening. We are I think they're calling it a heat dome or something. I don't know. It's hot. I'm trying to stay inside as much as possible. The fans are cranked up and the cows are trying to stay cool. Oh, and in fun things that happen in the barn, which are not fun. The other day, I had a first for me. I was prepping a cow, so reaching underneath to put iodine teat dip on her, and just the angle that I was at, and she didn't lift her tail as much as I would have hoped. I had a cow pee directly into my ear, which I have never. Yeah, I've never had that particular thing happen to me before, so that was nasty.
I mean, I feel like anyone who's milked cows or probably even been close to cows long enough has gotten pee on their face or in their mouth or whatever, but in your ear is just unanticipated.
Like directly. And anyone who's been around cows knows how much comes out of a cow, too. And a while ago, I'd asked a friend, like, what do you think is worse? When you get shit on right at the beginning of milking and then it's on you the whole time? Or like the very last cow and you're like, you think you made it through without like any major incidents. And then, but it was near the beginning of milking. And I will say that that is worse because then I was just thinking about the fact that it was going to be like at least an hour and a half before I got to shower and rinse that out.
I feel like too, when you get something in your eye, the expectation is that you will go wash it out. And if you get something in your mouth, you can spit it out, and if it's in your nose, you can blow it out. But your ear is just kind of like,
I think it just lives there forever. Like, I don't know really where that goes.
yeah, it just lives there now.
I mean, some people, I've heard that urine is supposed to be sterile, but I don't know. I haven't gotten an ear infection though, so maybe it's okay.
Arlene, is your doctor a farm person or a non-farm person?
I have had so many doctors in the last few years, I don't even know. I think my most recent one, I have no idea. I've only met her once.
I just feel like what the world needs right now, Arlene, is for you to call your medical provider,
Yes.
flip on the recorder, and ask them if cow pee is sterile because it's in your ear.
All right. We'll add that to my list of things to do today. We'll put that in the cussing and discussing.
Yeah, I imagine it'll get the same response as I got when I had to call the vet to ask if I was going to die from having given myself a CDT shot that was meant for a very small wiggly lamb. They got a good laugh out of it, so that's for something.
You were all right. You're still here, so you must be fine.
Yeah, I did mean to tell you too that my children seem to have found out last night that they knew that beef come from cows, but I don't think they had ever extrapolated that to mean that our cows are for meat.
Oh, okay.
So the boy child yelled, "We can't do that to our cows. We gotta keep them and milk them and love them forever." And I was like, buddy, it's not how that works. Also, we only have beef cattle, so good luck with that, kid.
Yeah.
And also, dairy cows don't get kept forever either. So
True. All right. On that very empathetic cow note, should we introduce another Australian?
I suppose we should.
Excited to have another Australian guest. We are on a real run of Aussies lately, which is fantastic. So today we're talking to Katja Williams, who is joining us from, I can't remember which part of Australia, so she's going to tell us which part. And Katja, we start each of our interviews with the same question. So we always ask, what are you growing? So that can be crops and livestock and kids and all kinds of other stuff. So Katja, where are you from and what are you growing?
Thanks for having me on the show. So I'm from Dubbo, New South Wales. So right in sort of the middle to west part of New South Wales of Australia. And what we're growing is we've got two properties. So on our main property, we have our Shorthorn stud, and it is just over 2,000 acres where we have 150 calving cows, 100 two-year-old heifers, which are getting ready to calve, 120 yearling bulls, 62-year-old bulls, which we have in the upcoming sales over the next 2 months, and around 120 other weaner heifers that are not in calf. And then on our commercial operation, it's around 9,000 acres, and we're running 360 calving cows, 150 unjoined heifers, and around 200 stud bred but unregistered trade steers. And then we have over 1,000 trade steers that we do every year. And on top of that, we are raising kiddos. So we have Eddie, who's 4, Mac, who's 3, Caroline, who is 1, and the next one will join us before the end of the year.
That is a lot of cows and seems like a lot of kids, although, not the same numbers. But
I'm glad it's not the same numbers.
Arlene, were you able to math fast enough to keep track of how many cows that was total?
I didn't have a total, but it does sound like a lot of acres.
It's a lot.
Yeah, a lot of animals, but also a lot of acres. So how does that look in terms of moving livestock around? Because that sounds like a lot of ground. I mean, I know it's a lot of animals as well, but what does that look like for you guys in terms of how you manage the space and all of the animals? Because that means that everything is moving around, I'm guessing.
It does, yeah. So it takes time. We move things more often on our commercial block out west. So they are quite large paddock sizes, but from the front yards to the backyards, because the block's quite big, we've got 2 yards setups that we use, and it's actually an hour driving between the front yards and the backyards. So we do that mostly by bike. And I've recently, for me with the kiddos, I've recently upgraded to a side-by-side.
Right. And so is everything on pasture or eating whatever is on the ground? Are you growing any crops for all those animals as well? Are you buying in feed? What does that look like?
Yep, so on our main block, which is where we are living at the moment, we have cropping as well. So we do an oaten crop, which we will strip graze with the stud cattle early on in the season, and then we'll pull them off the crop just before harvest so that we can strip for the seed to replant, and then we'll go through and harvest oaten hay as well from that. And then we also have a centre pivot irrigation system using sewage effluent water from our local council, which has been treated to 1 grade below drinkable, and we grow lucerne chaff quality lucerne on that. So we will cut from spring to autumn, and we'll cut around every 4 to 6 weeks depending on the season.
Now, I looked up that word the other day because I wasn't sure what it was, and I think for us that's alfalfa. Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Is that the word that I meant to look up because I didn't know what it was either?
Yeah.
It was like a lucerne, of course.
I'm sure this is something that we probably will understand if we just have to translate it. Yeah. So we all speak English, but our crops sometimes have different names. Okay. So yeah, similar but different. I didn't know that was an option in terms of an irrigation program. And I'm guessing that you guys are probably in an area where there are issues with drought and with water usage. So is that a consistent source of water?
Yes. So we have an allocation that we have to use. So that's fantastic in a drought situation because we still have to use that water because it has to go somewhere, and we are one of the places it has to go. But it's also, in a really wet season, you still have to use the water, whether it's raining or not.
Right.
Sorry, how does the water get out to your allotment? Is it piped or is it a canal? Or it's not something we do here. I mean, honestly, in Iowa, we don't irrigate much at all. But I like this idea of like grade B water, as opposed to like grade A milk. It would be grade B water.
Yeah, so it is piped out under pressure. Yeah, so we put in our watering times, so the day and the rough time that we're going to run the pivot. It does take, depending on how much water we're putting on it, it does take 24 hours to 48 hours to get around a full circuit.
So what is your ag background like? I'm hoping for your sake that you did not like grow up in a city and just decide to, I don't know, does this still count as chicken math if you go straight into the scale of production, Arlene?
I don't know if it's chickens. Sounds like Australian beef math, which is probably similar to chicken math.
Yeah, it feels similar. Anyway, how did you end up here?
Luckily, I didn't jump in cold turkey. So I did grow up on a sheep property north of Orange, New South Wales. So that is a cold region in New South Wales, and it's very, high in food and fine wine. And so I grew up on a sheep property there. So I learnt the basics early of moving sheep through yards and moving them and lambing them down and those sorts of things. But definitely on a smaller scale. I used to call myself the floodgate pro because every winter, at least twice, we would lose a couple of the floodgates on our property, which was about 6. So then we'd go down, we'd have to repair the floodgates. So I knew the basics of fencing, I knew the basics of animal husbandry, and we did have chickens and guinea pigs and things like that growing up as well. But moving to a family farming operation at this scale was still quite an adjustment, not for, I did have a lot of the skills that were necessary, especially even just moving out of town and knowing how to change a tire and knowing how to look after my own vehicle and things like that. But definitely on the scale and definitely on the management side, it was very different. So that was I used to call myself the apprentice farmer. So I would turn up as the apprentice and I would be happy just to go through the motions and learn from there. So I have been on farm 10 years. It was 10 years in March. And it was just a really nice integration, learning skills and management along the way.
So you mentioned that it's a family farm. What does that look like in terms of the other family members who are involved in your business, and how do you manage both the working and the personal relationships with between family members? I know Katie and I are both in situations where we are neighbors with our in-laws. I don't know if that's your situation as well, but that brings a whole different dynamic to family and working life that we know a little bit about.
Yeah. Yeah. So we live 100 metres away from my in-laws. We are on the same property. We work with each other every day. And initially, when I moved to the farm, before, because we didn't have a second dwelling or a workers' cottage on the place, so I did actually move in initially with my parents-in-law as well. So that went, from sort of seeing each other sort of casually every few weeks to then actually like living with each other. And it's exactly, I sort of explain it to friends as it's exactly like moving in with housemates when you go off to college or you go off to uni, and you work out whose dynamics are and what their ruling on certain things are. You are under their roof ultimately. So, you need to work out, the dynamics going from being quite independent, doing my own washing, doing this, doing that. I need to learn when was it my turn to do those things. And I needed to make sure I wasn't stepping on someone else's toes. If they had a particular role that they did at a particular time, then I needed to learn that and to allow them to continue because I was moving into their home. So it was really great because it set up a lot of boundaries early, but it also meant that when my husband and I did move out into our house, we did build on farm, that there were certain other boundaries that we then had to set up. So it's like, okay, so we actually need to start allocating a start time for the morning, because you can't drive past the house and just beep the horn to be like, get up, we're already going, and then we're late getting somewhere and doing some job. So setting those boundaries early on. I know a lot of people think that sounds really harsh, like setting boundaries, but you're just opening up those communications and tackling those problems as they come up was really good.
And I don't think boundaries have to be a negative thing. I mean, it's really just about having expectations, right? And everyone communicating how things are going to work well. You're right, because if someone decides that 6 is the start point in the day and someone else thinks it's 7, then resentment can build up. But at the end of the day, maybe someone thinks that 6 is the end of the day and the other person thinks it's 7, or whatever those times are. But if everyone isn't on the same page and hasn't communicated what their expectations are, then it's never going to work well. I love that the way you approached that living with in-laws at the beginning, though, because I'm not sure that I would have been as gracious. I was able to live with roommates in university, but you didn't have to maintain a relationship with those people for the rest of your life if it didn't go well. So with in-laws, that would definitely be an extra challenge. But you also have that long game in mind, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also used to tell friends who, because I was one of my first people in my friend group to move into a family farming operation. So I would always tell them as well when they were having trouble, adjusting. I would say, remember, you've got the entire farm and you've got whatever space that you set up as well. If being in the house is too much all the time, find somewhere else on the farm that you can call yours or that you can be alone. Because realistically, especially if you're not working on the farm, with your in-laws, you've got a whole space and you only need to be inside, for certain meal times and to sleep. So if it does get too much, if there is a lot of complications in the relationship, limit your space.
Now, I will say that spoken as someone who lives in a warmer climate than us, because there are times of the year in Canada and in Iowa where you kind of do need to be in the house. Otherwise, or I guess you layer up. I mean, you could be out in the snow if you want. How did those boundaries translate once you added kids to the mix?
Yeah, they definitely adjusted. I think starting, the communication early is important. And I think reminding people of the boundaries that you're setting and why. Sometimes people need to know the why behind a boundary so that it's not so foreign, that it's not so unusual for them to hear. And it's a different season of life. So you're going to be more flexible, before the kids come along than when you have them. And that's purely based on circumstance and your child as well. Not sure if that answered your question, Arlene.
I think too, setting boundaries before you need them is great because you can set them when you're calm and not hungry and there aren't cows out all over the damn place and there's not a screaming baby and whatever else. But I think to giving yourself permission and making, at least for me, making a point of being vulnerable with my in-laws and really telling them what I need and what I need help with and assuming the best, because I think at least in the States there's a real thing about mothers-in-law and that they're all only exist to ruin your life. And my mother-in-law is fantastic. Like, we still disagree about stuff because we're both adult humans and we have our own ways of doing things. But communicating with her like she's a person instead of my husband's mother has been tremendous. And I find actually fairly frequently more difficulty communicating with my father-in-law because he never farmed with women. And, it's just sort of a weird thing. But, I'm his favorite daughter-in-law now, which, I mean, he only has the one, but I'm his favorite. So, yeah, I think that setting out to set boundaries is tremendous and just giving people the benefit of the doubt that they're probably not setting out to ruin your life. And if they are, then to hell with them, cut them out. I'm a firm believer in just saying no to those people.
I think, too, it's important to remember that our in-laws are also allowed to have their own boundaries because sometimes, especially I know when I first started to have kids and was feeling overwhelmed and expected or asked for a lot of help, it was hard for me to hear no or that they were busy or they had other plans. But, I have to remember that these, the kids that came into our lives, that was our choice and they don't owe me, you know, childcare whenever I want it for free or whatever it is I wanted at the time. So respecting boundaries on both sides is really important because if you want them to respect your boundaries around whatever your family culture is going to be, then you also have to respect your in-laws boundaries with what they're willing to give and what their lifestyle is going to be like going forward. And that's true on the farm too, what they want to continue to do or what they want you to take over as the next generation, or all those things are conversations that you have to have, like you said, Katie, with respect and acknowledgement that no one's coming from a bad place. Hopefully, that you're all going into it with the best of intentions.
And absolutely understanding, as Katie said as well, like, have they worked with women before? Because my parents-in-law had boys and I come from a girl family. And so the dynamics in our household was so different. And we were raised to be independent and vocal. And that's just completely different on the other side here.
I think to being, especially as my kids have gotten older and I've gotten more practice at it, being realistic, as someone who waited until I'm 43 and my kids are 6 and 7, so my in-laws are older, and being realistic about what help they might offer versus what help will not negatively impact them. My mother-in-law has thankfully gotten a lot better about feeling okay about setting her own boundaries and saying, we can't watch the kids more than like once a week, because now our kids are getting big enough to like go get their own drinks, to be more self-sufficient. But when they're, 3 and 4, and it takes a lot of physical keeping up with them, my in-laws would say, "Oh, of course we can keep them every day this week. Don't send them to daycare, send them here." And then, 2 days in, they'd be falling apart, which is understandable because it's physically hard work. And just respecting what you know of their actual boundaries versus what they might offer, especially if they're Midwest nice, which I think is still a thing in Canada and Australia and everywhere else. That tendency to offer more than is really a good idea. All right, so you're a podcaster like we are, and your podcast is called The Rural Mum. Who do you speak to, and what are you talking about?
We actually have a similar theme to yourselves. So I started podcasting under the Rural Mum when I sort of first became a mum on the farm. It started more as an Instagram following and then moved into podcasting and YouTube. And it was really about, okay, you've married your farmer, you've moved to the land, you've moved into a family farming operation or back into a family farming operation, and what the hell are you doing? Like, what are the life skills that you need to be able to move into that family farming operation, to move to the farm, and then on top of it, you're going to add kids into the mix. So it's about sharing stories, but more than that, it's about the problem solving and the tips, tricks, and advice that we can share mum to mum about, or woman to woman, about moving to that farm and what is included. Because as mums in general, you wear a lot of hats. As a farm wife and a farmer, you wear a lot more hats as well, and it's quite broad. And the assumed knowledge that people have of you when you move to the farm is a lot. And then you kind of feel like initially, in some circumstances, you're feeling like you're going against the flow of the water because you've got to catch up with what people's expectations are. I remember turning up to one of my first Royal Easter shows. So we don't have county fairs, we have agricultural shows. And I turned up to one of the big ones in Sydney, and people assumed because I was dating my husband that I knew cattle. And I was handed these two bulls, which would have weighed almost a ton each. And I'm just standing there absolutely petrified because they were like, "Oh, hold this. You're Ned's missus. Here you go." And I'm like, I have no idea what to do. Like, luckily they are stud bulls. Luckily they were very well broken in at that stage. But I thought, if these two like have a go or they want to go for a run, like I'm not going to stand in their way. So it's really interesting trying to then be like, well, what I should have said was, I don't know anything about cattle. I don't know anything about holding on.
Yeah. Do you have a sheep? I could hold on to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, too, it's interesting that you bring that up because it's such a, when you move into someone else's family business, you're not only dealing with their interpersonal relationships, but at least on our farm, our kids are the fifth generation on this farm. I think fifth. So you're dealing with like 150 years of family drama and business drama and ways that other people were raised to raise animals, because like, this is my mother-in-law's home farm, so my father-in-law moved in here and brought all the ways that he was used to doing things from his family farm and then brought them here, and it's just such a thing. And it is really nice as a podcaster to get to talk to other people who experience that, because I feel like most people in most of the developed world, can get food delivered and have the option of seeing their in-laws at Christmas, maybe Easter, maybe birthdays, and not having to try to parse 150 years worth of, well, so and so was really tight with money and that's why we're all like this and that's why nothing got fixed or whatever else.
Yeah. And that set of furniture came from your great grandfather, so it's going to have to stay in the house whether you like it or not. And yeah.
We actually had a discussion in our family this weekend about whether it was fair to ask the cleaning lady if I could pay her extra to break some stuff so that we could get rid of some family heirlooms, because it's just like, these are,
they start to stack up after a while.
and when people had 12 kids, it was one thing, but now, my husband's one of 2 kids. I'm an only child. So it funnels down to this really narrow spot. And
to your house, your china cabinet.
Yeah. Well, we have the farmhouse, so we should have X, Y, and Z. And
right. Yeah. You are the preserver of all of the things.
Yeah.
I think most people have a shearing shed or a barn or a shipping container filled with items like that.
Yeah. I know my husband was telling me the other day about an incident where, I should be careful, but an extended family member came looking for an item that had been disposed of, because we now live in the farmhouse and also are in charge of all the sheds and the attics and the spaces. And so over time, when we had time, we would clear places out and we would look at things and think, okay, if it hasn't been used in 50 years, do we need to keep holding on to it? So there was an item that got disposed of, and then he got grief for having gotten rid of it because, well, it was there when grandma moved out. And it was like, okay, but she doesn't live here anymore and she didn't use it for 25 years before. So we are allowed to throw some things out. We don't have to preserve every item that has ever existed.
We ended up getting a very rude contact, is my understanding at least, from my mother-in-law's second cousins or some damn thing about some set of bedroom furniture that had been left here at some point in the last 150 years that this farm has existed. They want it back. None of them knows what it looks like, I don't think.
Oh, they don't even know what it is.
No, I don't think any of them have ever seen it, but it is clearly a priceless family treasure and they need it back.
Yeah, it must still be there. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The expectations.
When my cousin took over their family farm, so that's my mum's original farm block, he meticulously put on an incredible clearing sale. And he sent the link to everybody in the family. And he was like, if you want any of this stuff, you need to buy it. Or it's gone, like someone else will.
Because if it's important, it's going to be important on that day and you're going to put your money where your mouth is, right? Rather than, come back 20 years later and be like, well, that cabinet, do you still have it?
Well, and
our goal as podcasters is to create a program that makes you feel less alone as a farming, ranching, or homesteading parent, but we can't do it alone.
Supporting Barnyard Language on Patreon helps us cover production costs and ensures the future of the show, but you'll also gain access to exclusive perks and behind-the-scenes content.
Your support enables us to continue bringing you the thought-provoking conversations and inspiring stories week after week. So if you find value in what we're doing and want to be part of the Barnyard community, head over to patreon.com/Barnyard Language and choose a tier that suits you.
Katja, the other thing that's been shocking for me, and I'm wondering, what your experience is with this and what you hear from your listeners, because we know that Australia is just, it's even more than Canada, vastly different than the US in ways I never anticipate. That first time, especially with my mother-in-law, the first time that my mother-in-law not stuck up for me, but praised my skills in front of other family members and legit told my father-in-law that I'm better with calves than he is, was just and I feel like that's something that makes this sort of communication with other farmers and farm, new members of farm families so crucial, because these are things that don't happen in other families. I mean, I assume if I was just married to somebody, nobody's ever going to tell my mother-in-law that I'm a better cook than her or something. Like, I would not expect that level of drama. But it's, when you're working with family members, it's such a different thing. And she's not wrong. I am better with calves than my father-in-law is, because he doesn't have the patience, which is fine. They're not for everybody. Calves are stupid. I mean, I love them, but they are not bright.
Absolutely. I think I do talk to a lot of people who maybe don't have in-laws who they're working with in the farm who will stand up for them or compliment them. But I do quite often say, so do they allow you to do a task unsupervised? And have they added to that task over the years? Because sometimes if they haven't been raised in an era or a time where, or in a family where praise has been openly given, then sometimes those extra responsibilities or those extra add-ons or doing something unsupervised on the family farm can be a compliment in itself. So sometimes it's not looking for the words, but sometimes it's also looking at what you're allowed and what you're not allowed to do on farm. And then even that dynamic changes depending on who's on farm. So I can drive a tractor, but I don't drive the tractor when the blokes are on the farm, because they, that's their role. They drive the tractor. But then, when you need a feed run or you need to hand out hay or you need to do something and they're not here, you just jump on the tractor and do the job as well. So it's something that you can do unsupervised when they're not here, and that's part of your hierarchy, and then that's part of praise as well, because you can do that when you need to.
So I see too that you are changing the name of your show. Is this correct? To The Ultimate Farm Wife, which I love the mental picture that this brings to me about like it being a TV competition sort of situation. Are you planning to change your content or your approach or topics, or why are you doing this? There, I'm just not even going to try to ask. Like, I'm out of words. Sorry.
That's the question. That's fine.
So when I first started The Rural Mum, it was in the mindset of I'm on the farm, I've moved to the farm, we're now having kids, and my mum's group that I was placed in, because in our community you get placed into a mum's group, and I was having to drive to those meetings, and I wasn't really relating to a lot of the other mums in the group, because the problem solving that I was needing to do with my introduction into parenthood was so different to theirs. They were from a townie mindset. So I was thinking, well, what I'm doing surely can't be outstanding. Like, it can't be something out on its own. Someone has to be doing the same thing as I am. So I started on Instagram, and then I moved into podcasting and the YouTube channel space under that Rural Mum, under I'm a new mum and this is what I'm doing on farm. And I would sometimes put up questions and problems to be solved, or I would chat to a lot of my other guests on those unique situations of being a farm mum. And then as that's progressed, one of the other projects that I'm currently working on is writing a book. So collating all the information, all the tips, tricks, hacks, and advice that I have gathered over 60 plus interviews into a book. And I thought, well, what would I make this book into? And I was like, well, it would be the ultimate guide of being a farm wife. So it would be the ultimate farm wife guide. So the rebrand is to sort of shift from me personally and my experiences on the farm to really relating and tying in what I'm actually doing in the podcast and YouTube space, which is trying to open up those conversations, open up those pathways into the practicality. I'm a very practical person. I'm a very planned, atypical person. So really trying to see where that fits in the family farming dynamic as well, because even though in the family farm and the season, we do things at the same time every year. So I still don't know why on a lot of farms and with a lot of people that I talk to, everything is like high cortisol, high stress. Like why are we getting the cattle in the yards? And then being like, we don't have the vaccinations, we've now got to drive to town, or whatever. Like, let's get some planning in there. Let's get some pre-sight, because particularly if you haven't moved from a farming background, you've got to learn, like, we do what, when? Like, we're getting the cattle in and we're processing them. So what do we need?
You know their gestation. You know, you should know when, within a range when these cows are coming. Yeah.
I feel judged. I'm just going to say it. We don't have great handling facilities. Our farm was dairy until 15 years ago, and now we raise beef cattle. So we don't have beef handling facilities, because until my last 6 or 7 years, we only had like 5 beef cattle too. So we really didn't need anything. So now every time we work cows, the vet has to bring the tub chute out, which is great. But every time it's like, what do you mean we need to move these doors around? What do you mean we need to open these gates? And it's like, she comes like 3 times a year. This is not a new every time. And I mean, yes, every planting season, everybody freaks out. And I'm like, don't we plant every year for like 150 years? This is not a, and I'm
Yeah, the weather fluctuates, but now we have apps for that. 100 years ago, they just had to guess.
Hopefully my husband is listening to this. If he is, hopefully we're done planting by the time it comes out. I love you, dear. I'm sorry. It just cracks me up every year that we all freak out about it. Like it's a shocking new thing. Anyway, are you including anything in the book about changing expectations or setting boundaries or just saying no to shit? I feel like that's been one of my biggest struggles, is these unspoken cultural expectations about what a good farm wife is doing. And it can be really toxic and horrific.
Yeah, there absolutely are sections on boundary setting. I just find it to be so important. And again, as we said earlier, like, it doesn't have to be, the big bad wolf of boundaries. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. In the end, those expectations are easier to manage than people. And so by setting those boundaries and going by them and standing by them, because, a lot of the time, say I don't work on the farm 2 days a week because I have life admin that I've got to do, and they're the days that I do the podcast, and they're the days that I don't have my kiddos at home with me, which allows me to do a deep clean, which allows me to actually sit down and do the business activity statement or like the books, whatever it is. They're the days that it needs to be done on. So, but holding a 2-day-a-week boundary every week, I have to remind someone, I do not work on farm on this day. I cannot do that on this day. Please stop scheduling work where you need me, because if there's only 4 of us on the farm, please don't put something on those days where you need me. Like, I understand we've got to work in with the vets. I understand we've got to work in with the contractors. I understand that, but there are other days in the week where that can be done.
Yeah, that's really important.
I have to say, too, as someone who works from home in an off-farm job, and my job is very flexible, but I think it's so easy for people to forget that no matter how flexible it is, at some point the work has to be done, and that there's not just an infinite, you could put your bookwork off forever, but it's not going to be worth the mess that you're going to have at the end. And that maybe you can flex one afternoon for a different one, but you still have to have that afternoon. And generally, it's probably less trouble to refuse to flex it at all, because the minute you do, it's, well, but this is special too.
Yeah, that's right. You do it once or twice, and then all of a sudden those days disappear, and you're farming full time, and none of that other stuff is getting done at all. And then you're taking that away from somewhere else.
And it gets harder to reinforce because you've dropped your boundary before. So sometimes the expectation is, oh, you're going to drop your boundary when I need you. And it's like, no.
Yeah, only in a real crisis. And I will determine if it's a real crisis. If I see cows running.
Yeah, your crisis.
Yeah, if I see cows running by the window, I might consider stepping out the door.
One of my favorite things that I've had to learn, I don't always say it out loud to the person, but I say it internally, and that is, your failure to plan is not my crisis. If you if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, and that's not a crisis for me. So I don't need to drop everything I'm doing that I've planned to do because you haven't come up with an action plan or put it into a timetable that's achievable. And that helps me because I definitely, when I first moved to the farm, was a yes person. Yes, I can do that. Yes, I can take that task on. And they were massive days and they were massive tasks. And now I'm like, can't actually fit that in with the kids. Or, yes, I can do that. I can't do that today, but I can do that tomorrow, and it will look differently to how you want to do it because I will have the kids. So, if we're in the middle of potty training, so if one of them has an accident, I'm going to need to pause, change them. If, one of them, if we're doing something with a hose and they decide that they're going to cover themselves in water and it's winter here, so it's freezing, well, yes, I'm going to have to take them back to the house to get them changed, or I'm going to have to change them and try and warm them up. So it's going to look differently because my priority now is the kids and not necessarily the farm work. I can get certain work done when the sun sets and the kids are in bed. I can go back out to the shed and finish that job, or I can go back under torchlight and finish doing that filter or whatever it is. But again, with the boundary setting, like I can do that job, but I can't necessarily do that now. And it may take me extra time to do it because I'm the primary carer of the children on this farm, and they are the most important thing to me.
So you talked a little bit about your motivation for starting your podcast and your platform. What was your transition to parenthood like, both for you individually and in your relationship? Because we know that transition to parenthood can impact your relationship as a couple too. And I suppose also, I mean, we already talked too about the extended family, because when we all live and work together, it affects everybody.
It was a baptism by fire, and you might understand as we go further along, it was not a normal introduction to parenthood. So we were in the middle of one of our biggest droughts. So we went 5 years with little to no rain. Like sometimes within a 12-month period, we would not have had rain. And that lasted for 5 years on farm. And during that time, we got married and we had our first child. And so we were in the depths of drought feeding. So I went in and had Bub, and then, so that was Eddie. He's now 4. And at day 5, so I was released from hospital at day 4. Day 5, he was strapped to my chest mustering, and by day 7 he was on the feed run with me. So we would leave the house early, we wouldn't be back till well after lunch, and so I had this newborn who I was trying to feed. I breastfed all my kids for at least 5 to 6 months. So I'm trying to learn to feed, I'm trying to learn him, I'm trying to learn all the new mum skills, but then I'm also having to drive the ute, which was manual but one-handed, while I'm doing that, listening to the blokes as they're feeding hay off the back. And even prior to his birth, I actually shoveled feed and handed out lick and supplement to all the cattle until 30. He was born at 39 weeks, so 38 weeks I'm still doing cattle work in the yards. I'm still doing all that because we just had so much on it, and we were definitely in survival mode already, just going through the motions. So while it was a lot, I'm also really grateful because it definitely gave me the skills from day 5 that Bub is transportable. Bub needs me, and as long as he's with me, it's okay. We're going to be okay. And as long as I've got a water bottle and some snacks, because when your milk comes in, you get so hungry. So as long as I had snacks and I had water and I had him and some spare nappies and some wipes, we were just able to do that. And then my second baby was right at the beginning of COVID. So Mac, who's now 3, and that was a whole different kettle of fish, going through pregnancy and birth during COVID. And then also when he came back on the farm, the drought had just broken. So we had a really late harvest. So I had a drought baby and then I had a harvest baby. So then day 7 postpartum, I'm back on the bike. I've got 2 kids with me, a newborn and another one. And, we're running lunches and we're coordinating trucks and, everything else that goes with harvest. So that was a lot. So not much to breathe. There's 14 months between them as well. So just going through the motions. But it did get to a point where it was too much. We hadn't rested coming out of the drought. We hadn't taken time off. Like, it was just a lot. So that's when it definitely got to the point where it was like, okay, we need new boundaries. We need to readjust to the situation. I need time where I can regulate myself and my body, because I was starting to show stress through my body that was not pregnancy and birth related. So, yeah, it was definitely a lot initially. But because I was such a yes person and I was used to being involved in the family farming operation on a day-to-day and a job-to-job basis, that was a really hard decision. And there were extra circumstances, which I won't go into today, but I had to draw a hard line. And I actually had to leave the farm, not physically, still lived here, but I had to say, no, I can't be on the farm anymore, because I knew if I didn't draw that hard line and have that time off, I would fall back quickly into old habits of yes, 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 I can be there. Yes, I can do that. And like, I was already wearing one child on my front and one child on my back. And I was like, okay, so I'm already carrying, up to 10 kilos of extra weight doing the normal jobs, and then having, your bag that you take down the paddock.
And that's just the physical weight. That's the physical weight, not the mental load. Like, that, what it takes to work, and also be thinking, like, is the one on my front hungry? Is the one on my back hungry? Like, when, is someone going to start crying?
Yeah.
Like, the mental load and the physical load together. I can't imagine how you held that up for as long as you did.
Pure survival mode, I think. So what that looked like for me was putting the kids into daycare, in the availability they had, which was perfect. It was 2 days a week, which worked for me. And then I got off-farm income, which was really hard for me to do, because my husband and I had always spoken about me being on farm with him and working with him. It's what we both wanted, but that was really hard to step away from. But once the decision was made and once everything started moving into motion, we got the job, we got the daycare, we started flowing, and that's what it looked like for 18 months. Then we found out we were pregnant with Caroline, and then we reassessed. Okay, what does that look like? Okay, I'm going to take unpaid maternity leave, and what am I going to do? And I said, I don't want to come back on farm for the first few months. I need to adjust to having 3 because I'm outnumbered and I can't wear 3. Luckily, Eddie was walking at the time, and Mac was getting quite independent as well, because I put a lot of effort into having independent children through independent play. Yes, they can get their own water. They're mostly toilet trained. I can either see that they've had an accident or they'll tell me, or, moving through those next motions. So getting into the next stage of independence when we had number 3. So that was, really good. And she's been a pretty good baby as well, which then gave me the confidence to say, okay, I can come back on farm. I think initially we started with 5 days of work. It was probably a little bit too much. Things were not getting done at home, things that need to, happen, that people just assume happen automatically in a household for everyone to run. So
it's amazing how those jobs just are supposed to magically happen. The groceries arrive in the fridge somehow, and food appears on the table, and clothes get washed with no effort.
yeah, and things are organized and pre-planned and all of that. So I was like, I left the house at the same time as you, and I got back the same time as you. Where in that time was I meant to cook, clean, and do the washing?
I think too, as someone who does work from home, and there is that expectation too that you're like, well, you're home all day. I'm working. They're paying me to be working. And
Yeah.
I know for myself, at least, I feel like if I could ever get ahead of all the things in the house, I might have a chance of keeping up better than I am now. But if there's barely time to keep up, there's never going to be time to get ahead of anything. And so then when my husband comes home and goes, for example, just totally theoretically, where's the car insurance bill? The fuck do I know where the car insurance bill is, sir? I, ah. So feel free to tell me to mind my own goddamn business. But as someone who had 2 kids in 16 months, both fairly unexpectedly, we had several years of fertility treatments, stopped them, got pregnant. We're told it would probably take another 4 years. Kids are 16 months apart. Did you set out to have 4 kids in 4 years, 5 years? I mean, you live on a stud farm. I assume you know how babies are made. Sorry. Um, it fascinates me how people willingly and knowingly go into having this many kids in a shorter time. And I am so glad my kids are so close together. I love it. It has been great for us. I don't think it's a choice I would have made. And more power to people who make that choice, but I'm always fascinated by how people decide when to have babies. And some people are just really fertile. So, cool. But anyway, I'm going to be real nosy because that's who I am.
No, good question. So Ned and I spoke about kids early on, before we got married, and even quite early on in our relationship to make sure we were on the same page. So Ned is one of 3, I'm one of 4. And so we always knew that we wanted more, definitely more than one. 2 if possible, and build from there. So after each baby, we reassess, is this still workable? How's this going to look in the future as well? And we decided that, that's probably a good number, where we're heading at the moment. We do know how it works because we do live on a stud operation. So that helps. And also, the decision to have them really close together was really important to us. So my younger sister is 3 years, which is very often a very good gap. But then also sometimes we still kind of feel like we're definitely in a different generation. And then there is, I think it's 12 and 10 years between Ned and his siblings. And we knew that was a too big a gap. So, again, just generation wise, you're in different stages of your life at different times. There's sort of not a huge amount that's the same that you can relate to. Like, you need to hold on to it's a different relationship. So I am actually a triplet with a younger sister. So to me, I don't know anything different as well. So having 2 siblings who are the same age as me, and being able to come to them with, any not even necessarily problems, but thoughts and ideas and things within the same time period, has just, like, I feel very close to them. And that was really important to me, that the kids would feel the same as well. So still be very closely linked. We also knew, on a practical farming sense, that one day it would be us on the farm, and that one day we will need to, that my workability, my availability for the farm would need to be a lot more flexible and be a lot more involved again on the farm. And so that definitely played into having kids close together as well, because as our our parents and our in-laws are aging, we need to be very mindful of the actual physical farming work as well as the office work. So where is that going to fit in with everybody health-wise? We're very lucky at the moment that everyone is happy and healthy, but as we know, that can also change quite quickly, and farm accidents do happen, as much as that we can try to avoid them. So being able to say, okay, we would like a family that kind of looks like this, and we want it kind of within this time frame, so that on the other practical end, we can really hook into work with older kids or kids who are more independent. They don't need us all the time for those little jobs that we were talking about all the time, like getting a cup of water or getting something out of the fridge or something like that, or that they're happy to play on the loading ramp while we're processing cattle, those little things as well.
I think that's such a fascinating thing too about having ways to connect with other farm families is things like non-farm families maybe talk about having to take an in-law's car keys away, as they get older. Where our family, and I assume both of your families, are dealing with things like how do we tell dad slash grandpa slash whoever that it's not safe for him to work cattle through the chute, or how do we get everybody out of unsafe situations without making someone feel like they're being managed or that they're too old or whatever, you know, because you don't want to be disrespectful, but also you don't want to get somebody killed.
That's right. And I'll speak for my family too, Katie. And, I think I've spoken before on the show about the fact that my father-in-law had a stroke about a year and a half ago. And you have both that the ultimate concern about his health, and obviously we were very worried about that and wanted to make sure that he was cared for and making sure that my mother-in-law could get to the hospital and all those things. But there's also the day-to-day logistics of he was still working with us every day, and so now we're adding to the workload, but we're also adding to the workload in multiple ways, because now we're making trips to the hospital and helping mother-in-law, but also taking on the jobs that he was doing before. So it feels, you feel guilty for like you're upset that he's injured and unwell, but also like, oh my gosh, now we have to figure out the rest of this dynamic, because we're family and we're coworkers.
Well, and Arlene, I know for your family as well, because my kids are younger, but being in that sandwich generation, you've got one employee having strokes and one employee going to college. And that's, realistically, there's not someone just like, everybody's always like, well, just ask for help. Cool. Nobody's going to magically come just take over that role. Like I don't know about your areas, but it's not like there's just a huge number of roving farm employees looking for work, just desperately looking to help out.
Yeah, that you can train in a day and trust with your animals. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the other thing about livestock. What makes the ultimate farm wife, and what's the competition going to look like? I'm just picturing like, the bodybuilding competitions with like greased up string bikini and just shitty wellies. Because I do feel like anytime you see wellies on social media, they're clean. And I know my boots don't look like that. So.
No, my gum boots are definitely well used as well. So the ultimate farm wife. So rather than a competition, it is more like a space to challenge the way that you're doing things in a different mindset. So ultimately, you are against, yourself and your skills and your abilities, and opening up to other alternatives. Okay, you've got a problem which you cannot solve either with your skill set or the way that the farm is currently operating. So the ultimate farm wife is adjusting. It kind of sounds like an old-fashioned like homemaker guide. So you're adjusting to your situation, whether that be the family farming dynamic, the farm that you have, the enterprises that you run, and the season of life with kids on farm. So you're adjusting all the time, and you're reassessing all the time and problem solving. So the guide is the ultimate farm wife's guide to adjusting. Okay, I've tried this, it hasn't worked. People in my immediate group are not providing helpful advice or practical advice that I can implement into this situation. So we're going to look towards the ultimate farm wife and her guide and her interviews to be able to adjust ourselves to being the ultimate farm wives as well. But competition would be good. I should work on that.
I like the idea a lot that it would come with merit badges, like scouting does, like,
Yeah, or stickers or something.
yeah, cooked an impromptu meal for 12 out of 3 ingredients I found in the back of my fridge. You know, like emergency veterinary work on shit I don't know about, but, make it happen. You know, made my kid a costume for a stuffed animal, like whatever it is, because
Yeah.
there is so much, and I feel like we try to guard pretty heavily against toxic positivity because it is a real problem. But so much of it does come down to attitude and trying to see things as an engaging challenge to be overcome rather than just one more fucking thing. Which is pretty rich of me to say because I know that I've used the one more fucking thing phrase more than once this week.
Well, when your washing machine's broken, it's hard to look at anything with a positive mindset. I get it. I was there just a few weeks ago.
For our listeners, they had to pull our well pump 2 weeks ago because we literally didn't have water anytime the cows were drinking, like at all. And my in-laws are on the same well as we are. And then as soon as we got our water back, my washing machine stopped draining. So things are getting real smelly and gross around here. But the repair guy's here, so knock on wood.
Katja, you've talked about how your schedule has shifted at different points along, your motherhood journey. Can you talk a little bit about like what your daily and weekly routine looks like right now? And when baby number 4 comes, I'm sure it'll change again. But how is it working right now, and what does that look like in terms of farm work, childcare, household tasks, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I have, as I said previously, 2 days where I do not do farm work. They are either domestic, admin, or town jobs, because even just going to town with 3 kids, it's doable. It's doable, but it definitely adds to the stress and the time. And sometimes, because we are out of town, oops, sorry, that's my end. Because we are out of town, you've got to do the drive, and then you've got to do the jobs, and sometimes you've got more jobs than you have time to allow when you've got the kids. So they go on a day where I'm not on the farm and I don't have the kids, so that I can literally get them all done. And working that in makes it less stressful for me, it makes it less stressful for the kids, it improves. Sorry, let me pull that out. Sorry, I knocked something with my leg and my computer's sending off a heap of alarms and alerts. So then when I am available on farm, so it did originally look like I was leaving the same time as my husband and coming back the same time as my husband, and I would pack everybody's lunches and everybody's morning teas and a couple of thermoses, and that would just go on the bike or in the back of the ute or in the side-by-side, and we would leave and we would work, and then we'd come back. Not sustainable for us. Again, none of those domestic jobs were being done. So as it looks like currently at the moment, we are in winter. My kids do all have asthma and food intolerances as well. So what that looks like is we leave in the morning. I have a handful of regular jobs, so the feed run, mixing up feed, setting everyone else up for success the next day with a handful of jobs, and then it may also look like shifting some mobs or whatever it is that we're doing on the day, or setting things up for harvest, or a lot of the time I'll set the kids up in like a box trailer. Just sounds funny, in a box trailer, which is up off the ground, so they're not getting too wet, they're not getting too cold, they've got their rain suits on. In summer they're out of the way of snakes and things like that, and then I can air compress out the tractor, or if we've done hay or the chaser bin or something like that, I can air compress all of that out while the kids are upwind playing in that trailer. And then so doing a handful of jobs, and then I come back to the house, and if it's winter, I'll rotate laundry. So putting it from the washing machine into the dryer. In summer, I hang it out on the line. It's going to be drier quicker on the line than it will in the dryer anyway in summer here, because we have such hot, dry, windy summers as well in this area. So rotating that, setting everybody up meal-wise. My third, all the kids are so different. My third will not sleep in the carrier, and she will not sleep in a pram. So coming home roughly at the same time each day, popping her in the cot, setting the kids up for the other two for independent play, and getting like a heap of domestic stuff done in the middle of the day, and then trying to get back out on the farm in the afternoon to help my husband with jobs that he needs to do. Or for me, I mean, I love homesteading. I love my chooks and I love my dogs, and we've got a new pup at the moment, so just trying to spend 10 minutes with him every afternoon, building those relationships, starting to learn those skills. My dog is currently 10 years old, and Ned's current dog is almost 2, so trying to get him to come through the next generation coming through for him. Hopefully we'll get some pups out of the two of them as well, but working on, all those sorts of things in the background. We have put in raised garden beds so that if we don't get to town, it's okay. We have a lot of produce that we're growing anyway, and I love canning. So being able to bring the produce inside and process that as well, either if I have time during that day, because I love a job list. So if I can do that in the middle of the day when the kids are napping and having some quiet time, then that's great. Otherwise, I do that at night after they go down. So we've got jalapenos and tomatoes and all sorts of things going. And one of the things I did do when I first moved to the farm as well was we grew a lot of fruit, our own fruit growing up. So I did put in a mini orchard, which is kind of not so mini anymore. So making sure that I can get to my trees and pick some fruit, and if not eating it or straight up, then canning that as well.
And I should also note, if someone asks you to record a podcast in North America, you're also willing to get up in the middle of the night to record that. So you don't have a lot of downtime, it sounds like. But I love that you have been willing to be adaptable and have, the setting of those boundaries sounds like it's really critical for you and for the farm. So it's not just for you, it's actually setting everyone up for success, right? By holding those boundaries and taking that time and setting it aside, because a lot of those tasks do become a whole lot harder if you've got 3 kids along for the ride.
Yeah, I definitely found the more structured I am in my day, the more flexible I can be, because I can have my job list and I can have my day roughly, scheduled out. And one thing that I'm very good at is allocating time to a job, so I know how long it takes me to get a job roughly done, but I also know how long it takes me to get from point A to point B on the farm. So if I get, an emergency call up to be like, we're in this paddock and we're doing this and we can't get the cattle through the bloody gate, I'm like, that's okay. I will be there in 15 minutes. Will you still need me in 15 minutes time? Because that's how long it's going to take for me to get the 3 kids out of the house, to get them in the side-by-side and get up to where you are in the paddock. It will not take less than that. So will you still need me in 15 minutes time? And usually by the time I get the kids set up, I get them in the side-by-side and I get up the paddock, it's done. The job's done. So being able to know those timings and being able to know, what else needs to be done. So yes, I can shift that block to here and we're still going to get everything done that we need to. That's absolutely crucial. Then that helps as well. So I do always talk about knowing your timings.
I'm exhausted just thinking about it.
Are you looking for a blend of rural charm and personal growth? Tune in now to the Dairy Hour podcast with me, Val Levine. Join this dairy farming mom for insightful chats, empowering tips, and plenty of laughs. Nourish your mind and embrace the journey. Subscribe now to the Dairy Hour podcast, where every episode is a breath of fresh air and inspiration. Available wherever you get your podcasts. For more information, check out dairygalval.com.
So you, like we've said, are pregnant with number 4 and your kids are quite close together. As the ultimate farm wife guide, what would be some of your tips for someone who's about to either be outnumbered by children or is about to have some kids who are close together in age? What are your ultimate tips?
Good question. Definitely keep them fed. If if kids are kept fed and watered consistently, they are much easier to manage. I know what I'm like when I'm hangry, so I can't put that pressure on my kids. So if they need to eat all day, I will feed them all day, and I will come up with some way to make sure that they are continuously grazing and keeping their blood sugar up, because that makes it much easier. When I was trying to sit down and breastfeed one or do a job and breastfeed one, I would always set them up with food and maybe 2 activities that they could choose from, because that just allowed me the time, even if it wasn't for very long, just to focus on the task that I was doing. So that helped. As I've talked to other farm wives as well, setting spaces up that we use all the time on the farm for success with kids. So I spoke to a sheep farmer's wife, and she ended up putting a swing set up in their sheep yards. So the kids are up off the ground. Again, they're not in the snakes, they're not in the mud, and they would just swing on the swing set while ever they were doing the work. Or they have like the old school yards with some ionized tin. So they actually take chalk down to the yards, and the kids will draw on the yards with the chalk while they're processing. So things like that. We have taken down some toys down to the cattle yard, so that the kids can play shop underneath the race. Like when we're not loading, they'll play on the race. It's a safe spot for them. They're not near any of the cattle. We can see them. And so they'll play with their toys there, or sometimes it's just setting them up in a space like a spare cattle panel, where the stock aren't near them, and they can climb up and down that, but it's not within the eyesight of the race where we're trying to process the cattle, so they're not going to spook the cattle. They're out of the way, and my boys love climbing, so they will climb up and down that panel, which is out of the way, for hours. So that helps as well. And I think it's really important to create an environment that the kids love and enjoy as well, because if they can enjoy something within that space, I think in the future they'll be more likely to come back to the farm if that's something that they want to do. They're probably not going to want to come back if it's stressful in their memory or they've got triggers later on. So taking the time to set them up for happiness and for that independent play, but then also making sure that it's safe for everybody. It is a huge lift off your shoulders when you know that you've set something up so that it's safe and it's workable and you can see them but still focus on the job that you've got to do. Having the kids close together means that we've really worked on that mateship as well from a very early age. So they do have someone to play with. It's not as if they need you to focus on. And even when we do things, and now the boys are into puzzles or they're into Lego, and making sure that when we're doing that, even if it's at home, I might start doing some Lego with them, or I might start doing, the activity with them. But then I also will walk away for a set period of time, and then I will come back and check on them. Like I can always see them, I can always hear them, but checking in on them so they're not used to mum being there all the time. They're happy with that independent play, because that helps so much more on farm and when you've got to do something with another child. So one of the other kids needs your attention. They want to tell you a story, or they've hurt themselves or something like that. If you can set the others up already so they're independently playing and they don't need you all the time, then you can focus on one child and then the other and then the other as well. And then you can focus as them as a group as well. So they've got that independent focus, but then they've also got a group ability.
Those are really good tips. And I've got to say that as someone who lives in an area where snakes are not a concern, that is something I had never have to worry about. I mean, we have like, garter snakes and stuff, but there's no venomous snakes that I need to worry about in my farm safety plan. So that's a good reminder that I've got one less thing on my list. Those are some really good tips though. I love the idea of being conscious about the fact that you're not just keeping your kids safe, because that's obviously a part of it, but also setting them up in an area where they can have fun and be safe. So like you said, that all those farm jobs are not just a lesson in sit there and don't touch anything, or stay in that truck, or like keep your seatbelt on, or whatever, like that they have a safe place to be, and you can also still safely complete your tasks. Because like you said, if you're distracted, then that's not safe for either the kids or for you as the person who's doing a job that is potentially dangerous, right? Like you have to set yourself up to be safe as well.
So, what do you enjoy the most about raising little ones on the farm?
Probably the space, actually. Um, One thing I did also learn very early on is that if I wanted to try and keep inside cleaner, then we needed to be outside more often. So definitely having the space. We have verandas on three sides of the house, so teaching the kids to ride their bikes on the veranda was much easier than on the gravel road. And being able to have space for Ned put in, I think it was last Christmas, a sandpit for the kids. So Caroline doesn't quite play in it yet because she definitely is at the age where she tends to eat the sand. But the other boys having, a space where they're outside the house and they're not pulling things out of cupboards or wanting to build pillow forts all the time, which we're happy to do in winter, but trying to keep on top of the housework by definitely keeping them outside and keeping them busy helps. So I love having the space to do that. The boys are very loud. And I'm sure Caroline will be as well when she starts becoming a lot more verbal. So being able to be outside and not have to worry about the neighbours or anything like that is definitely a good thing. And definitely love taking the kids with us down the paddock and being able to have the freedom and the flexibility to take them to work with us and to see them growing. When I did go back to work off farm for that brief time, I was missing some of the small moments. So when the boys would do something for the first time, and now that we are back on farm together 5 days a week, then I don't feel like I miss those little things as much. So I'll see them. So I'll see Caroline take her first steps, and the boys, their thinking and what they come up with and the stories that they tell during the day, really appreciate the time and the space for that.
Mm-hmm. What is one of your or some of your biggest parenting struggles these days?
Fitting everything in. My children don't sleep very often. I'm actually surprised we haven't been joined by one already or more. They were definitely, all three were up by 3 a.m. yesterday. So we don't have a big sleeping household, which means I don't sleep very often either. So that's probably one of the biggest things at the moment. I definitely felt like when I first moved to the farm that I needed 8 hours of sleep to be able to operate. And now I'm like, I might have had 3 hours, which is not sustainable, but definitely getting easier to learn that and work around it as well. Being able to work out, okay, when can I maybe not sleep, but rest in other parts of the day? Okay, I've got 10 minutes. I'll sit down and have a cup of tea, and that'll hopefully recharge me for the next couple of hours. So definitely fitting everything in and not having kids that sleep are definitely probably the challenge at the moment. But again, that's just reassessing the next day of, okay, what am I doing? And can I do that safely with the kids?
Yeah. Not sleeping is, I mean, you make it you're saying it with a smile on your face, but I mean that adds up, right? Your the sleep deprivation makes all of those tasks and even trying to be organized that much harder when people are disrupting your sleep all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other things that's quite a challenge, you touched on it earlier, Eileen, as well, is, if something does happen, like you're not well, I am the parent, like the primary carer. And in a lot of circumstances, the farm does come first. So then, and I don't, because we all work on the farm, just because I'm sick doesn't mean that the others can have the day off as well, because they're already down a worker, a working bee. So then, like, I don't have family close. My closest sister is an hour away. My parents are over 2 hours away, but they're also retired. So at the moment, they're actually 3 days drive away, kind of thing. So being able to, okay, if something does happen, whether it's an emergency or you're sick or something like that, you're still the primary carer of your kids, because someone else can't have them because of either where you're located or what type of sickness you have, or all of that. So it's not easy to find a babysitter or a nanny or someone who can just drive to the farm and be there for you to help you get through that. So that's another thing. It's like, okay, if I get injured or I get sick, it's still on me. I still need to be able to do these jobs, whether that's domestically or in the garden or look after the kids or do something on the farm, like the feed rations and stuff like that. So how am I going to work that with the kids? Yeah, it's definitely something as well.
Yeah, there's no sick days, unfortunately, in either farming or parenting. It doesn't really go with it. It's not in our benefit package.
It is not.
All right, so we ask all of our guests, if you were going to dominate a category at the county fair, what would it be? And categories can be real or made up to ensure that you win.
Well, we already take cattle to a lot of our shows and we do quite well. We are fifth and sixth generation shorthorn breeders, so we've got a lot of history and a lot of genetics behind us which help with that, as well as the current management. So that helps in that category. I do love putting some things into preserving category as well, but I think if there was a category that was like management and organization, here's your farm your farm problem, solve it. I think that I would also do quite well on that one as well.
Just after our discussion today, I'm already ready to sign up for some of your organizational services. So I'm in.
That'd be a good consulting business. I would happily pay for that.
Yeah, there you go. Then you have to follow the plan, though, Katie. That's where it gets you.
Maybe I can outsource that too.
Yeah. So I will go ahead and move us into our cussing and discussing segment. As listeners know, they can send in their cussing and discussing entries to either our SpeakPipe or to our email address. They are in the show notes. Katie, what are you cussing and or discussing this week?
Trying to pay for things. And not in a I don't have the money kind of way, but my debit card is expiring in another week and a half, which apparently means that at no point during the month of May is it able to be used for anything. It just keeps getting rejected over and over. And there's another website that no matter how I try to pay for anything, it just keeps kicking it out, saying, we can't process your payment. No idea as to why. Just can't. Just not gonna. And if I'm trying to give you money, take my damn money. Don't make it harder for me to give you money. I already don't want to give you my money.
And I'm going through the steps to give you the money.
Just make it easier. Or shut up about wanting my money. Don't.
The thing that's been bugging me lately, too, is it seems like every store I go to, their kiosk is different, right? You'd think there'd be some kind of standardization, like on this one you tap on the front, on this one you tap on the screen, on that one it's not a touch screen, so press the buttons, on the other one it is a touch screen. I saw one the other day that I couldn't see the screen. It was because I was wearing sunglasses, and the screen, through what I guess through polarized lenses, you couldn't see it at all. So it's just like every place you go, it's a little bit different, or you try and tap and that doesn't work, and then you have to use your chip, and then you have to use your swipe, and yeah, there's too many options. Just standardize it.
Two, if you live rural like we do, tap to pay with the card is not even a thing. Like, you can't. Our bank just asked if people might be interested in this as an option. So then when you go to an urban place and everybody's like, you can just tap, you can just, I guess, wave your phone near the, like, I don't even know. I don't even know what the options are. And then you look like a yokel because you're just like, huh? What is this plastic money you speak of? And
do you have the thing with a carbon copy that you can just like slide across, right? Like, and put your actual signature?
I was listening to a podcast yesterday where they were like, did you know that there used to be places you could write checks? And like, you would just write a piece of paper, and I'm like, I'm sitting here with my checkbook in my purse, like, no, I've never heard of such a thing. Anyway. Katja, what do you have to cuss and discuss today?
Something a little bit different. It would be the advice that people give new farmers or new mums. So, something that really grinds my gears is when a mum raises a concern, whether it is about her personally, mental health, or something on the farm that doesn't feel right. Like her intuition is being flagged on something, and they raise that with their community that is meant to be like their support community and their people, and people just fob it off as, well, that's being a new mum, or that's being a new farmer, or, well, that's just the situation that you've found yourself in. Like, none of that is helpful. And that grinds my gears. If it's something to do with somebody's health or somebody's body, like, your support system should be like, go see your GP. Because if you feel like you need to raise it as a concern, it's probably a concern. Write it down, go see your GP. Or same thing on the farm. Like, if something is being flagged, you need to understand why is that being flagged on farm, because it could be unsafe, there could be a hazard that no one's noticed. Whatever it is, trust in yourself. And if you're raising as a concern, if it's been flagged, even if your immediate circle of confidence is just fobbing it off, find someone else to talk to it about, because they may not just be able to understand the circumstances that you're in. Find someone in a similar background, or find professional help that you can talk to someone about that.
Especially because then when it does become a thing, people say, well, why didn't they say anything? Why did they never know that this person was a problem? Why didn't they go to the doctor? Because you told them not to. You told them not to trust their intuition, and then they didn't, and now you're mad about it.
And often by the time someone brings it up, it's been a concern for a while. If you're bringing it up to somebody, it's probably something that you've thought about internally for a bit. Maybe you've talked to your partner about it. It's probably not just something that you're like, oh, I feel this twinge. Maybe I should, figure out if that's a thing. It takes effort and it takes work to go to the doctor, to make an appointment, to do all those things. So if you're to the point where you're bringing it up and you're considering it, it's probably already gotten to the point where you need to dive into that, and exactly to trust your gut. It's not something that's maybe just come up. It could be something you've spent a significant amount of time already thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust the gut.
Arlene, what do you have to cuss and discuss today?
So I've just been thinking through our conversation today about how much I love the fact that we get to do this podcast. Like, this is just, and that we're talking with someone across the world who we've never met before, but we have so much in common with. And I just love the fact that both through agriculture and through parenting, that there are so many similarities. And I don't know, I shouldn't say this because, there's lots of other things in my life that bring me joy. But right now, every time I'm done an interview these days, Katie, I'm really happy that we're still doing this and that we get to do this. So
I'm going to call your husband and tell him that he doesn't bring you any joy anymore.
yeah. It's planting season.
It's because you make her watch too much curling.
Hugh, you also bring me lots of joy if you ever listen to this episode because you're out baling hay. But yeah, I just love the fact that we get to do this. It's not a job because, we're not actually making any money at it. Join the Patreon if you're a listener because we'd love to actually be able to cover our costs. But this is, I guess, a public hobby that we get to have, but we get to make some amazing connections and friendships. And maybe we'll get to go to Australia someday and meet everybody.
I seriously want to, because the idea of 11,000 acres of cows is just because we don't get that in Iowa. Like, there are people who own that many acres, but it's just corn. It's just fucking corn as far as the eye can see. It's not, please don't come for me, Iowa Corn Board. It's not very interesting. It's corn. Just
and then soybeans,
corn. I mean, we've put a lot of time and money into making it exact. Yeah, sometimes pigs, sometimes layer hens, but I will admit that I have watched a lot of McLeod's Daughters up to season 4 or wherever they started killing off everybody, and there was literally none of the cast left. That's what I picture when I picture your setup. So if that's wrong, please don't ruin it for me. I assume that it is hot men in helicopters herding cattle. And if that's not right, I don't want to know about it. Just going to say it. And lots of women inexplicably doing all their farming in really short cutoffs. Of all the things that you could choose for farm work.
That doesn't seem snake safe. I mean, you can correct us on that one, Katja.
No.
Or sun safe. You'd get so burnt.
Right? Thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
God, we are old. Listen to us. You'll just get a sunburn. Snakes will bite your butt. Such a mom.
So thank you so much, Katja.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. So if people want to find you online, listen to your podcast, all of that good stuff, where should they find you?
So I am on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and podcast. You can find it under The Rural Mum, or as we undergo our rebrand, you'll be able to find it under The Ultimate Farmwife.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for depriving yourself of some sleep. I hope you log off and then try and lay down right away, but I'm sure a child will wake up within seconds. But we got through a whole recording, so that's amazing.
We did. And that's another thing about recording in the middle of the night.
Thank you for joining us on Barnyard Language. If you enjoy the show, please support us on Patreon with a donation.
Big thanks go out to our show editor, Krista Paffrath at the Rural Podcast Network.
Please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen and follow the show so you never miss an episode.
If you want to connect with other farming families, join the private Barnyard Language Facebook group.
We are always in search of future guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to chat with us, get in touch.